Back with us tonight, Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, former lieutenant governor of the great state of Maryland, now the host of the Michael Steele podcast, and Steve Schmidt, veteran political strategist who led the McCain '08 effort, has since left the Republican Party. He was among the founders of the Lincoln Project, dedicated to the defeat of one Donald Trump and Trumpism. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Michael Steele, here's my question. Does the book change any minds in your party? Do we all watch together as Mitch McConnell, for one, just one member of that red wall, finds a way to say he's not bothered by asking China to help in the re-election?
At this point, I don't think the book changes anything in terms of what Republicans are going to do. They've already exposed what they're going to do. We saw the play from the Mueller hearings and from the impeachment trial. So the book at this point is more like a coda. You know, it's just like the final note on a song that we are all too woefully familiar with. I don't know how this incentivizes the GOP or Mitch McConnell as the leader to take a different tone or tack with China at this point. You know, there will be the typical, platitudes about, the potential threat that China have or any of our adversaries may have in our upcoming election. And the bromides that go with that. But other than that, I don't see what that changes at this point.
Steve Schmidt, is Bolton's courage dependent on a Simon & Schuster imprint? Where was his testimony? Where were these stories in real time that could have changed the course of our history?
Good evening, Brian. Bolton's conduct here is disgraceful. There's no other word for it. John Bolton was the national security advisor to the President of the United States. He swore an oath, as he's had many times in his career, to the Constitution of the United States to preserve and to protect it, to defend it. And he did no such thing. He acknowledges that the president is completely unfit, that he's incompetent at a degree that's hard to describe, that he is inappropriate, abusive of his office, that he's solicitous of foreign hostile powers to help him in his reelection. And he didn't say a word about it. Didn't go to the Congress, didn't go to the oversight committees, did nothing about it except get rich on a book deal with Simon & Schuster, which is his prerogative to do. But let's compare John Bolton to General Marshall, Chief of Staff of the Army during the Second World War, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense. General Marshall, in his retirement, one of the most esteemed men in the country, would not serve on a corporate board because he did not want to be seen as monetizing his public service. He thought it was inappropriate. And how far have we come from the probity and rectitude of men like General Marshall and the people of that generation that had some understanding of their commitment and duty to the country, to the John Boltons of the world, who's been an architect of disastrous foreign policy. And in his last public act, and it will be his last public act because he should obviously never serve in government again, it's to do this to the American people. And what he did to the American people here is fail them rather profoundly.
Both of these gentlemen have agreed to stay with us through the break. Coming up, a president driven to distraction. We will show you when we come back. Welcome back. I want to show you something. Today, the president held a roundtable with governors and small business owners about reopening the economy during a pandemic. But as our friends over at The Recount pointed out in vivid detail, while his invited guests spoke and shared their stories about the struggle to stay in business, Trump was on his phone.
So increased labor would be probably the biggest effect on our bottom line. Additional employees have been added to answer the phones, and runners are needed to take orders out to the guests waiting in their car. By mid-May, sales were picking up, and we did have our best Mother's Day ever, seeing double-digit growth over last year's weekly sales.
Still with us are our friends Michael Steele and Steve Schmidt. Steve, I'd like to begin with you. I would kill to have the Curb Your Enthusiasm music to lay over that, but we'd get in all kinds of rights troubles by doing it. But here's the thing. As these people are pouring out their stories of staying in business and staying afloat, this isn't happening in just any venue. He isn't even sitting in front of just any fireplace. I know you know about where he is seated and what is written on the wall just above him.
Written on the wall above him and was inscribed there, Brian, in 1945 is John Adams' prayer that only good men, only wise men would ever rule under the roof of the White House. And if you think about our founders, they spent incredible amounts of time debating, wondering, fearing the possibility that one day the country would elect a president like Trump. And in fact, the entire American system of government is set up anticipating that moment, and we reached it. There is no president who has ever served in the White House, and we've had a couple of scoundrels for sure, but there is no president ever who is so utterly lacking in the capacity for moral leadership, for the human quality of empathy, who has any interest in doing right by the country, serving the American people. What you saw there today is someone who just doesn't care. He's not interested in doing the job. He doesn't look at those people with any love, any concern. And leadership, in the end, is always an act of love. The president of the United States has to love the country, and he's got to love the American people who fill it. And that includes all of the American people, includes Republicans and Democrats and independents and the people that didn't support and didn't vote for you. And so we just see there again, on a day where 40 million people are unemployed, where we're closing up on 120,000 dead Americans and many, many more to come. We see America's decline in the world, and we see a president staring at his phone disinterested. And understand this, that's exactly what he does in his intelligence briefings. That's exactly what he was doing when they came and told him in February and March that a pandemic was coming and we needed to get ready. He doesn't get it. He lacks the intellectual, the mental, and the moral qualities to be able to lead. And that's why when we get ready for this election, the fundamental choice is between a good man, Joe Biden, who cares, and a bad man, Donald Trump, who does not.
Michael Steele, to that end, about Mr. Biden, I'm going to put some state polls on the screen. In all of them, and they are really valuable states politically, Trump is underwater to Biden. Admittedly, in a lot of them, this is margin of error stuff. But as we say every night, 138 days to go now.
President like Trump. And in fact,